Hi, welcome to Wrap Women's Power Women Summit. I'm Kirsten Schaffer, the CEO of WIF, and I'm here with Lena Dunham, the director and writer of Called Birdy.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yay. Congratulations, Lena. The film is so special. It's so whimsical, it's poignant, and it's a little odd to say about a film set in the 13th century, but it really is timely. I
Thank
wanted to
you.
start by having you talk about how you came upon the story.
Well, this is a book that I read for the first time when I was 10 in 1996. And it was, it was a Newbery Prize winning children's young adult novel. That's the highest prize in children's literature, written by my friend Karen Cushman. And I fell in love with the book and I read it over and over again. And it was dog-eared, and I have about, six copies lying around my house. And then I always fantasized about what it could be as a movie. And so after Girls began, when I was in a position to think about what I wanted to make next, that's when I optioned this. Then there was about, an almost 10-year journey to take it from that process to the screen. And I was lucky enough to partner with Working Title and Amazon, and found myself finally making the film in 2021, and here I am.
I'm excited for my 13-year-old to see it. I just watched it over the weekend.
Thank
But
you.
now I
That's
can't
really, like,
decide.
when adults give me compliments about it, I'm delighted. But when someone in the 10 to 16 range tells me that they liked it, I really feel like we've done it.
Do you think I should have her read the book first or watch the movie first?
I think the book and the movie have very different endings. And so I think that maybe it would be interesting for her to watch the film and then read the book and find out all of these really interesting details and a kind of different alternate version of Birdie's ending. And then you can report back to me what she thinks about the two different endings. But the book has lots of amazing stories in it that we weren't able to pull into the movie just because we had to winnow it down for the screen. And so what's fun is you can kind of see Birdie in the movie and then read about more of her adventures once you get the book.
That's such a good idea because I have a 13-year-old and an 8-year-old. I've been looking for a book to read to both of them. So I'll have watched the movie and then we'll read it as a family.
Amazing. The other day, I just decided I was going to reread my favorite book from when I was that age, which was The Wolves of Willoughby Chase. So if you can find The
Yeah.
Wolves of Willoughby Chase, that's another great one.
Okay, good, good. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the casting. I mean, it's phenomenal. You did such an incredible job. Who
Thank
did you
you.
cast first? What did that look like?
Bella was the first person that we cast was Joe Alwyn, who's a friend and who I wrote the role of Uncle George for, and he was kind enough to step on when it was just a kind of nascent project. And the next person that we cast was Bella. Nina Gold, my incredible casting director, had worked with Bella on Game of Thrones and actually given Bella her first screen role. And then it was about finding parents who felt like they could be in Bella's family, which brought me to Andrew Scott and then Billy Piper. And I was so lucky to have a partner in Nina. She's really comes at casting from such a brilliant perspective. She's seen everything, she's read everything. She has unconventional ideas that bring nuance to your characters in a different way. My favorite experience is to write a character, think I know them, and then be totally surprised by who ends up in the role and how they end up reading it.
And how much of it was on the page and how much of it was improvised?
I always, when I'm directing, will tend to do a few takes totally to script, and then maybe one take with a little bit of improv, and then I'll grab the best moments from that improvised take. And it may just be a glance or a cough or a line. And I have to say, in this film, we'd always do a take with a little bit of improv, and because everyone was so brilliant, more than usual, a lot of it ended up staying in. But I would say it's like the meal, like the dish is the script, and then like the improv is the garnish. So you don't change the substance of the scene, but improv is a great way to just add texture and realism. And my favorite kinds of films are the ones where you're watching and you feel like you're getting a glimpse of life as it is. I love watching a movie and going, was that in the script or is that a decision that was just made? And when it's when you can feel that there's like a spontaneity to the choices, that's always makes me feel the most connected to the thing I'm watching.
I think in this in particular, it adds to that kind of whimsical feeling that is just so special about the film. The Another place I really saw that come through is in the production design. Like you don't see a lot of films from this time period that have that kind of like color and like it's like hand carved like bed frames and
Oh, I'm so glad that you noticed that. Our production designers, Kate Quinn and Andrew Matheson, are so brilliant. And our set decorator, Stella Fox. I mean, we had the most amazing people there on this show, and they were just so attuned to what the story needed. And those hand carved wooden things, Stella, our set decorator, actually went to India and ordered all of the bed frames and aspects of the furniture. I mean, our production designer did things as incredible as create a tiled floor that secretly had a line from the book in the tiling. I mean, it was really ornate, and it hewed to the period while also bringing some modernity. I was like, what would it be like if there was a medieval bedroom that was historically appropriate yet looked like something you could also enjoy in an anthropology catalog? Like,
totally.
favorite genre is the bedrooms of teenage girls on TV shows. Like I feel like I can map the bedrooms of the teenage girls on all, like I still have the bedrooms of Tia and Tamara Moran's sister like imbued in my mind for all time. And I was like, I just want to add this to the canon of like great teenage girl bedrooms. Cher Horowitz's bedroom.
It's totally inspiring. And I think you nailed it. You nailed it.
There was someone on Etsy for a while or someone online who was doing the floor plans to great TV apartments. And I had the floor plan to Mary Tyler Moore's apartment framed. And they also did the floor plan to Hannah Horvath's apartment. So I love a good, cozy living space that I love to really enter a cozy living space on camera.
Well, I think they'll be adding yours to that, would you say Pinterest board or some whatever
Pinterest
that
board,
was?
I'm learning about Pinterest. I'm learning.
Oh, yeah. Um, I wanted to switch a little bit and talk about some of the themes. One of the things that comes through really clearly is that masculinity is complicated, right? So we see this this father in Lord Rollo who is, is really sort of struggling, and himself really drawn into these sort of childlike moments, and then these really interesting queer characters in the sheep herder and I call them the Chippendales monks.
Oh my God. Thank you so much for seeing what my intention was. The Chippendales monks, who are hooking up with each other.
Totally. I mean, that looked like the funnest place to be, is the
100% where
monastery.
you would want to hang. I do have footage that no one has seen of all of those monks dancing to hip hop. Just want to say that exists.
Can't wait for the outtakes. Looking forward to that. So, when you were, is that in the book, or is that something that you sort of brought to life?
Well, I think that there's a lot that Karen hints at in the book. And it's interesting, it's for young readers. And so even though it is about issues of marriage and growing into your body and puberty, it really only hints at some of the ideas about sexuality. And it's funny, when I told Karen, I was like, and then I wrote about the idea that Perkin, who's the goat herd, is gay. And I was like, and the Perkin, obviously is gay. And Karen was like, I never thought of that. Like, if that's what Karen, the author of the book. And I was like, oh, I thought you told me that. It was almost like she had started a thread and I had picked it up. Like I had felt something in his character, in his sense of being an outsider, in his sense of wanting something different from his life, that spoke to me in thinking about, the closest queer people to me in my life. And I wanted to reflect that perspective, because it's not as if, queer people didn't exist until the 20th century. Obviously, that was always a part of culture, just one that we didn't speak about in the same way. And I think I love that you said masculinity is complicated, because I think Andrew Scott and I talked a lot about the idea that despite the fact that this father is making some choices that we can't condone about how to deal with his young daughter and how to treat her, we didn't want it to be that masculinity is toxic. We wanted it to be that masculinity is a trap and a patriarchal structure is hurtful to everybody. Like when there is a lack of equality, it affects everyone negatively because of the way it dehumanizes women and the pressures that it places on men. And so that was something that Andrew and I talked about a lot, and he really pushed me in great ways to make sure that the father didn't just feel like this brutish stereotype, but that we understood that he too was suffering under the weight of the demands of this particular time period.
It's interesting. It's the moment that seems to free him is when he tells the midwife that he's not accepting that his wife and babies are going to die, and he pushes through that convention and pushes everyone to get those babies out, and they do, and that's like the turning moment when he can finally go against all the tradition.
Well, that's a great note. Like the idea that he's like, yeah, I'm not going to call a priest. I'm not going to do what you guys think has to happen next. Like I have a different belief system about how this is going to go. And also that his faith in his wife ultimately gives her the ability she is so tired emotionally and physically, not just from this birth, but from the fact that she has been through many, many experiences of child loss, but her husband having this faith in her and showing her this gentleness and this love actually makes it possible for her to push through, power through, and ultimately have these children.
Right. And then that's when everything starts to shift.
And that's also when he starts to recognize that his family works because of every member of it, and that it's this like very delicate ecology, and that as crazy as his daughter makes him, he can't lose her.
Right. And then he finally stands up for her.
And it's interesting. I've had a little bit of feedback of people going like, but don't you want, if it's a feminist idea, why isn't she saving herself? And I was like, well, I think that, feminism can involve saving yourself, and feminism can also involve, she was able to show her father her own humanity. She was able to stand up for her own humanity and make him understand why she deserves to be taken care of, just like everyone deserves to be taken care of. So to me, that's a feminist idea. And she was able to convert her father to a more feminist way of seeing the world.
Well, and it also happens after she's given a choice, right? So she I'm forgetting the character's name. The one that Sophie plays.
Oh, Ethelfreda. It's a hard name. It's not a classic name.
Ethelfreda, when she says, well, let's run away, let's run around, let's go around the world, let's travel the world. And then Birdie says, like, she's given that choice. And she says, no, she says, I want to go home to my family. And then she makes a series of choices that help them all come back together.
That's exactly right. It's interesting. Sometimes we have this conception of ourselves, like to be our best self, we have to escape where we come from or become a totally different person. And she starts to recognize that like the things that she loves about herself are essentially tied to the things that she finds so challenging about the world around her. And that as crazy making as her family is, it is, I think many people can relate to the idea that as crazy making as your family is, it still is your home, and it's the place that you feel most at home. And learning to be able to see all of them as human, accept their flaws, and exist within the infrastructure of a family allows you to be more accepting about the world at large.
I mean, such important lessons for today, right? I think you did a really good job.
I think so. And there were so many movies for me as a teenager that were so formative for me and how I saw the world. And I really wanted to make something that could potentially talk about the bigger issues in a way that a whole family could watch together, in a way that was palatable. Like that experience for me of watching films with my parents, watching art with my parents, and engaging in conversation about it, that was like the stuff that really formed me. And so my hope was that this could be like, it makes me so happy, the idea of you watching it with your kids, because my hope was that it could be something that would be like an intergenerational bonding movie.
Totally. It totally is. we're gonna make that happen. I wanted to talk a little bit about the representations of all the things related to reproductive justice, right? It's a thing that I think many of us are thinking about right now, like how we got to this place of Roe v. Wade being overturned and the responsibility that creators have to represent periods and miscarriages and infertility and abortions and all that stuff that we rarely see on screen. Now, I think you have actually been bringing us that in your work. For many years, but I think we need more and more and more of it. And I wonder how you've been thinking about this in the last few months.
It's a great question. I mean, obviously, this film was made before Roe v. Wade was overturned. And even though of course, we understood that there was still a large segment of the American population that was anti-choice, it was impossible to kind of imagine where we would find ourselves now. And my background, which I've spoken about, is like I grew up in a house with a very vocally feminist mother who was a member of a group called Women's Action Coalition in New York that regularly demonstrated for reproductive justice, rights, access. I mean, my mom taught me as early as I was, 6, like, we don't say pro-life, we say anti-choice, because everybody's pro-life, but only these people are anti-choice. She really kind of inculcated us with a sense that it was our duty to try and ensure that people were allowed to make choices about their bodies, and inculcated us with a sense that our bodies belong to us. Like, that was one of the first lessons that my mom taught me. I think it wasn't until I started struggling with endometriosis and seeing how many even well-meaning doctors had not studied women's bodies, had not given real consideration to women's health problems, had not, studied a disease like endometriosis that affects potentially more than 1 in 10 women, but we actually don't know because people aren't actually taking the measures to understand the illness. And so once I started my own journey with my health, I started to understand just how many challenges women faced in advocating for themselves in doctors' offices, in hospitals. I mean, and that also extends to women of color, trans women who are even further marginalized by the medical system. And, the battle against people with uteruses being able to make choices about their bodies is nothing new, but has reached a deeper sort of crevasse than we ever could have dreamed. And I think, well, I don't think I'm not, naive enough to think that any of my films are going to change the minds of the Supreme Court. I do think that the more we can show realistic depictions of what it looks like when women don't get the support that they need for their bodies. I mean, like, it feels very far away, but a woman being forced to give birth in her home or forced to deal with a miscarriage on her own because of fear of what it will look like if she shows up at the emergency room, like that's a reality we could be dealing with now. And this will bring up the infant mortality rate, and this will bring up the maternal mortality rate. So obviously this is something I could talk about for a long time, but I think the most important things are realistic and destigmatized depictions on television and in film. And having the voices of people who are affected being heard. I think The Cut is doing really, really great reporting on this right now. And then also making sure that we're encouraging people to donate to abortion funds to increase access for people in states where they can't get it.
Right. That's 100%. One of the things we've been talking about at Women in Film, in addition to everything that you just mentioned, is just the role that media plays in all of this. And
by the way, I want to say I've been a Women in Film fan for as long as I can remember. You guys do incredible work, and I love the way that you bring women together in an industry that can feel so divisive or like there's not enough to go around, and you make it not feel like a zero-sum game, and you create like camaraderie between people who really need each other.
Yeah, I think it's, that always has been the mission of this organization, but I think in recent years, it's become clearer that our power is in that collective action, right? The more that we come together to push for change from within this industry, the farther we're going to go. And that is really true around all the issues related to reproductive justice too, that
And
we
hopefully
got to
that
keep
this
going.
industry can at times, I think at its best times, when Hollywood isn't too up its own butt or taking itself too seriously, the industry can be a model for the way other industries can revise and change their own behavior. And like recently watching She Said, when someone said, what do people care about a bunch of women and powerful women in Hollywood when there's people who are being sexually harassed everywhere? It's like, yes, but these women could be models for revising behavior and changing responses in industries nationwide. And I do think that the hope is that the moves that we make as women in the film industry, we can reflect back that just like any other industry, we have to form a collective.
Totally. And not only is it about the precedent that we set as an industry, but it's also about the content that we still are largely creating for the rest of the world. And so the ways that we depict women and gender nonconforming people impacts the actual material conditions of women, not only in the US, but everywhere else. So it's a big responsibility.
Responsibility. It's definitely like the reason that I don't just that I have a production company and don't just sit in my room and write all day, which would be my first instinct, is because I really want the opportunity to shepherd and protect other voices the way that mine was, while I still did have my fair share of challenging experiences coming up in this business, and they still arise. I was very lucky to be protected in certain ways by my relationship with Judd Apatow, by my relationship with HBO. And so to be able to offer that to people who may be exploring the industry unprotected would be a real gift.
I think there probably will be a lot of up and coming writer directors watching this. Do you have advice for women coming up in this business?
I think that, it's a real, where do you start? Like I'm writing a book right now. And one of the things that I realized is, why do I want to tell the story of my first 10 years in this business? And I was like, because I hope that both the triumphs and the challenges of it can be a model for what it's like to try to live an authentic, creative life that in which, you also preserve your selfhood. And I think, creatively, my advice would be zoom in. This is what my mother, who's an artist, always said to me, is like, find your subject. And if it's true to you, it will be true to somebody else. Like the personal is universal, and the more personal you get, the more universal it is. That doesn't mean you have to tell the story of your family. My personal story this time was a story that was set in 1290 that was about a girl whose life I barely resembled mine, but the story is deeply, deeply personal for me on many, many levels. And the goal was that because it was so personal for me, that it could strike a chord in other people who had other young people who had similar experiences of their adolescence. And I think the professional advice is that it's really, really easy. I mean, I think about this all the time, as a woman, as a person who deals with chronic illness, I'm constantly, I know people may not believe this about me, but I'm constantly afraid to stir the pot, to be seen as a problem. I remember thinking when I started Girls, like, if I make a mistake, they're going to think this is why we don't give shows to 24-year-old girls. And the fact that when a man makes a mistake on the set, he's just a man. But when, a woman or a gender nonconforming or queer person or a person of color makes a mistake, they feel like they are having to stand in for all of the other people who want to do this job too. And that's a lot of pressure. Yeah. But that pressure should never keep you from listening to your own instincts if you feel like you're in a situation that is unsafe physically, emotionally, in which your rights are being infringed upon. And I think that was actually a lesson that I really was taking in from Bella on the set of Birdy. Is I loved seeing our lead actor, I loved seeing that this 17-year-old was that, young people today are really getting to, you know, we complain a lot about the rise of social media, but it's allowing people to speak to each other, and it's about really hard topics. And then for young people to advocate for each other and understand their own boundaries in a way that women who are coming up in the business in my generation didn't. And so I think, you know, it's a real, if you see something, say something, if you feel something, say something, because you will, if you are coming from a place of, you know, truth and authenticity, you will have other opportunities.
Right, right. And to your earlier point about things that happen to women on set, we do run the WIF sexual harassment helpline, which I'll just say here for anybody who's listening. Please call us if you need us. We're here to give advice and help connect people to attorneys and
Do, and
therapists.
it's so important, because oftentimes it's changing now, but oftentimes, like when I started, the people that you could report to on set were also your bosses. And so
Right.
that is not a safe environment in which to be, because you don't want to be the squeaky wheel, but you should never be afraid to be the squeaky wheel with WIF.
That's why we're here. And
Yes.
and to support a community of squeaky wheels.
This, I mean, the squeaky wheel gets the grease.
Right. I have so much more I want to ask you, but I almost feel like we should end on that note because it's such a good one.
I haven't heard that expression since my grandma taught it to me when I was like 9, so I don't know where that came from. But thank you so much for such thoughtful questions and for all the work you do. It's a real honor.
Oh, thank you for all the work that you do. I can't wait to see what you do next. We're always excited when there's a Lena Dunham film, a TV show, anything.
So nice. I can't wait to see what I do next either. Who knows? Thank
It'll be
you.
good, whatever it is.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.